My name is Jan Eleman, and I'm the founder of Servoy. And as always, I'm joined by Sean Devlin, who is director of products and also part of the engineering team here in the US. So you probably already have worked with him or seen him in the many webinars and also at Servoy World, where he's again going to be presenting some of the future products of Servoy. But today we're talking about Servoy version 2019-09 and another launch that is in time with our quarterly release schedule that's been going on. And today we're going to talk about that. First, I'm seeing some stars in the background, Sean, is it right?
Yeah, because we're launching, I wanted it to be space themed.
Oh, okay, that's pretty cool.
Is that okay?
All right, if anybody has any questions, then feel free to ask them in the questions channel. We will be picking them up as we go along, and of course, it makes it very interactive if you guys also post questions and comments. If you like stuff that you're seeing, feel free to share it with us. All right, Sean, with this very long, unusual intro, let's get started.
Okay, I want to lengthen the intro a little bit and remind you all that very fast approaching is Servoy World. We are adding even more activities. It's going to be really packed with a lot of fun stuff. We're going to talk more about that right at the end of this. So if you hang on at the very end and you want updated on Servoy World, we'll get into that. But as Jan said, we are launching the third quarter of 2019 release, 2019-09 version of Servoy. And typically when we do these major launches, we do a mini webinar series because it's a lot to cover. So again, we do that this week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I think today I'm doing something a little bit different. Usually I'm looking for what's the best stuff to demo. But I think there's a lot of odds and ends that get missed in a launch. There's a lot of fixes and enhancements and different packages. So I think we should go over that today. And so today will be kind of light and easy. And then I think we have big demos planned for Wednesday and Friday. So if that sounds good, let's get into it. We're going to talk about what's new. Of course, the Servoy core platform has been updated with dozens of fixes. In fact, I looked at the changelog and there were more than 100. However, because we do automated regression testing and internal bug reporting, that number is usually high. Those issues are fixed before they make it to production, which is nice. There were more than 20 enhancements to the core. And of course, we are aligning all of the extensions to be released alongside the quarter release of the core platform. So many packages have also been updated, and we'll get into that. Later this week, we'd like to demo some new developments in our hybrid desktop technology. We call it Servoy NG Desktop. So we have some neat stuff to show on Wednesday. And we've also made some enhancements in how to publish REST APIs and document them. And we're going to go through that on Friday. So just a quick overview of some packages that have been updated in addition to the core platform. We updated the Servoy Extra Components package, which has a lot of nice traditional business components in there. Many fixes and enhancements. Most notably is the multi-file upload component, which has been added. This is a pretty slick upload component. We'll do a very quick demo of this today, but this was covered. It had a complete webinar session devoted to just this component back in August, and we announced that it would be available in the next version of Servoy, and today we are at the next version of Servoy. So I just wanted to remind you that that has now been made available inside the Servoy Extra Components package. We're also releasing our popular NG Grids package. This is basically a maintenance release. There's mostly fixes in there and one small enhancement. The also popular SVY search, which will search your database with sort of Google-like search idioms. That is being updated, kind of a semi-major bump there because there were several fixes in there, or enhancements in there as well as fixes, and we will show a little bit of that. Some other packages that are updated, Bootstrap Extra Components, which is also traditional business components that are based on the Bootstrap libraries. We did some fixes to those and enhancements to the navbar component. And then the core Bootstrap components were also updated, including enhancements to the calendar component. Unfortunately, today I don't have demos of the navbar or the calendar enhancement, but what we'd like to do is update the demo.servoy.com website to show what's changed or update the sample solutions that come with those. We also updated the 12-grid layout manager. This is for responsive layouts, and there's been some fixes there, mostly around also how it's used in the form editor and the zoom capability. So if you are building responsive layouts, the developer experience should get a little bit nicer with this release. Just to also point out some changes, every time there's a release, there could be small changes which will affect you when you upgrade. And so I scanned our product backlog and our release notes and find a few breaking changes or changes that you should be cautioned about. One is if you do automated sort of automated deployments or building WAR files through the command line utility. So this would be something you do automated, not manual. There is a change in the in one of the parameter names. So you'll want to watch out for that. If you're doing that, you go through and fix your routines. Otherwise, that could break for you. Also, the font awesome component, there were some library conflicts there, and now it is required that you also include the root class FA before you could just skip it. So that's something to watch out for as well. We also moved a couple components, but we'll get into that in the demos coming up. So the demos that we have today include the multi-file upload component that I was discussing. That'll be just a quick demo because we did cover that in a prior webinar. Some small enhancements to the list form component, which was updated and also moved. The SVY search utility module has some updates in it that we can show you, and there's an enhancement in the WAR export process. So these are all just kind of small demos, just showing a few small things, and then we'll also cover a few odds and ends, and I think we'll have plenty of time to take questions about this new release. So let's get into it. I'm going to launch a demo solution, and we'll come into the first demo. We introduced the multi-file upload component in a prior webinar, and we said it would be released with this release. This is it. You can drag it on your form. You can drop files onto it, or you can also browse through your file system. You can see that you can add files to it and then upload them. There's a method that you can handle uploads. You can also have, there's plenty of events that you can capture as you're adding files. It's really a slick component. There's a lot of interactivity, a lot of chances for you to capture events and work with it programmatically. But the reason that I'm showing it to you is because this was done in a demo before, and now it's available, and I'll show you how it's available. If you look at the multi-upload file form in the form editor, you can see that I dragged one component on the form. Let me minimize all my console in the way. So I just dragged this one component on the form, and I was done. And this is now located in the Servoy extra components library. So you can get that through the web package manager. It is released now and available. Scroll to it. There it is. And it's called multi-file upload. So you just drag this one on your form, and you start to adjust the properties, and you can see that there are quite some events in this one. So when files are added or removed before they're even sent to the client, you can operate in a modal mode. Again, this was covered in a prior webinar, so I would urge you to look at that if you're interested. Also, we did add a wiki documentation, so if you go to the repository location for the Servoy extra components and you go to wiki, let me go to the root of that. you see the list of components here. They all have wiki documentation. And now we have multi-file upload. And you can see that there is a nice little video and also a table of contents showing you the various parts of the API and also some options that you can customize it. So this is a pretty comprehensive documentation to make it easy for you to use. You may be wondering about the classic file upload. That's this component. That is sticking around for the time being. We'll wait and see. My gut feeling is that most people will use the new multi-file upload component because it does have that slick user interface and a lot more options. The reason is because we discovered a nice library that we could take advantage of. So perhaps this will be deprecated, but we're not announcing that today because then people would all have to rush and switch. We have no problem keeping this component in here for a little while longer. In fact, it was also enhanced in this release as well. But I don't want to confuse you. If you're just starting Servoy, you probably want to go straight to the multi-file upload component. Okay, we have also a bit about the list form component, which was updated. If I come back to my demo solution and look at my list component, one thing that you can do now is have a style class for the selected row in the list. So you can see that as I click through my list here, I get a little bar on the side here highlighting which record is selected. This came in as a feature request because Servoy has supported list views since the first version, and we always allowed you to specify, initially it was like a row background color, but as we moved to an HTML5 based client, it just lets you specify style classes. So in order to provide that support going forward, we added a style class hook, and I'll show you how that looks. If you're new to form components, this also was covered in a prior webinar. It's getting easier to do these webinars because most things are already covered. We did a whole webinar about the list form component, so go to the Tech Series homepage. We'll show the link at the end, and watch that webinar if you want to learn how to build a list component. This is just about a small enhancement that was made. What I did is I took the example solution from that prior webinar, example list form component, and I just included it as a module. And you can see that in my form components I have orders list here, which is that form, and then I have my orders form where I placed it. And I'll show you when you place a list form component now, and you select it, you have a property here for selection class. And so what I did is I created a class. I'll jump to that in one of my less CSS files called list selection, and I gave it this border left property, and that's what's giving this little border here to show up when it's selected. So anytime you click on a row, it's going to apply or remove the list selection to the row. Another enhancement that was added to list form component while we're on there is an event on selection changed. So there is, of course, the on record selection event of the form component. However, and this gets into the details of form components. So if you're new, don't let this scare you or slow you down. But form components don't have their own scripting scope. So if I actually open up that orders list component, form component, then I click on it, I don't have the on record selection event to bind to anything. That's actually on the outer form. So we may want to handle something where the user clicked on the list itself. So this event, if I go back to orders, on selection changed was added to list form component, and all I do is show a simple dialog here. And if I switch back to my example solution, And now as I click through my records, it's showing that. So this way you can bind it directly to the component, and it's not necessarily dependent on that the record selection changed, because the record selection can change for other reasons than the user clicked, right? The found set itself can change, and that would trigger an event that maybe you don't want. So there is that addition. Finally, what I would say about the list form component is that it has moved. Initially, this was out in Servoy extra components. We didn't have a home for it, so we put it there, and then we quickly realized this is a real integral part of the platform, so we made it part of Servoy default. So if you look at the palette here, under Servoy default, you now have list form component, and you can just drag that onto the form and set what the contain form would be. And again, the details of that are in a separate webinar. I just want to tell you what's changed. So now it's moved to Servoy default, and it used to be in Servoy extra. So if you upgrade Servoy extra and you upgrade Servoy developer, you won't see it down here in Servoy extra. It has moved. However, if you upgrade Servoy developer and then you haven't yet upgraded your Servoy extra components, it doesn't find the deprecated flag and the redirect to where it should be. So you may have a missing spec file error. There's a build marker to resolve that with a quick fix, but also what you can do is just upgrade Servoy extra components library, and it finds the deprecated flag and it resolves it for you. So that's exactly what I did here. I took an old solution, I upgraded it, I got the missing spec file error, and then I upgraded Servoy extra components, and it resolves it. So it sort of feels like a bit of a breaking change, but you just have to upgrade the package, the extension package, and the core at the same time, and that takes care of it for you. Okay, I think that's all I have to say about the list component. We also want to talk a bit about SVY search. I'll stay on the same example solution. So there were a few enhancements added to SVY search, one of which was the request for, well, we call it implicit search on numeric columns and date columns. So it used to be that when you just type in, say, a number, while it's searching all of the columns that you may have configured, it's going to skip the numeric columns unless you make it explicit. So unless you went, order ID : 10249. Oh, and I still have my dialogue. Comment that out, or else it'll annoy me. So I'd have to sort of explicitly type this. We made there was some requests for that to just be made what we call implicit. So I can do 10 we'll do a different one, 10250. And you can see that it's loading. This is really an integer field, but it allows you to do a match on that. Because it is a numeric field in the database, this is always an exact match. It's not like you can do a wildcard or put in a fragment of it. So when it hits a numeric column, it's going to try to match that exactly. It doesn't mean you can't combine it with other search parameters. So if I put Brazil, I believe this should work, but if I were to put USA, it probably finds no matches. Yeah. So it works just like everything else, and you can do that with numbers and also dates using the right date format that you've configured. So we did a whole webinar. It was probably quite a while ago that we've done a webinar on SVY search, but it's a pretty comprehensive webinar. So you just search our archives and you can catch up on that if you need to. There was one other enhancement that was made, and that was the ability to change the string matching. Initially it was just hard-coded to match on a contains. So when it finds a string fragment, let's put in TOM, you can see that it finds in, actually to narrow this down, I'm going to comment out something in here. Orders.js in the on search here, just to have it search fewer columns because it's easier to demo. Let me try that again. So it's really searching company name and a few others. So you can see that TOM matches this customer that starts with TOM, but it also matches this customer that has TOM farther in it, and also bottom has TOM in it for bottom dollar markets. So some people find it more intuitive that it's a starts with and not a contains. So if you change, there's a new API added called matching mode. So what I'm doing is for the search provider on company name, you can do this on every search provider if you want, or pick and choose. You can set string matching, and there's some constants here. The default, if you don't do anything, you can see that for most of them I don't do anything. And when I had it commented out, the default is going to go back to contains, which is what it always was. But now I can say that it starts with. And if I save that, and I come back here and I rerun the same search, I'll just hit enter. Now you can see that it's only finding the customer name that starts with TOM. It doesn't mean that I can't use other search providers. So you can see that I have here employee last name. So if I did TOM and Leverling, I get just that customer starting with TOM, but it still matches on the sales rep Leverling. So there's that dialogue again. Yeah, it's just a minor change, but some people had asked for it just to be starts with. I think that's also could be intuitive for your users, so that was added to the API. That's all we have to say about the SVY search package. One small change to the, for those of you that do WAR file deployments, and that's probably most of you doing ng client, when you want to go and export your application manually, I'm going to export solution to WAR. We have a new option in there, and I'm just going to click through some defaults here till we hit upon it. So you go through all the usual screens, and then you will come upon, I guess I have to put something in for this. Oh, wonderful. There we go. There, you get a box enabled here called command line equivalent. And when you click that, it copies it to your clipboard. And I will go into Notepad and paste it in. And you can see that it puts all of the switches for the command line exporter into the clipboard, and you can paste it into build scripts. So this applies to people who need to maintain their own automated build scripts, and maybe they want to make a change to one of the export options. And typically what they do is they go and they look at our documentation and try to find it buried in there somewhere, and they ask for help. And it's not the best way to tweak that. This will allow you to just manually walk through it and then generate the command line options, and then you can save those somewhere for your automated build scripts. So I think that kind of concludes the demos that I wanted to show you. Again, these are kind of the odds and ends demos. I have one other slide where we can talk about what else was updated in the core. So Eclipse itself was upgraded to the last version of Eclipse. There was a small enhancement on the solution model API regarding layout containers. For those of you who use calculations, we added an API to flush calculations. This is useful if you have a fairly complicated calculation, and typically they'll refresh on their own when there's a data change. And Servoy has some intelligence on how it figures out if your calculation could become invalid. But sometimes that doesn't always work. And so if you want to, you can programmatically refresh your calculations if you know that you've made a change that could affect a certain calculation. So you can call Database Manager flush calculations. That's new in the latest build, the latest API. As I said earlier, we made a lot of improvements to the form editor for doing responsive design. We also made some improvements to how JavaScript code complete works with respect to web components and custom types in web packages. So it used to be that those don't complete so nicely, and now you can see that you'll get code complete on those custom types. So that's a bit nicer. Something that was added for UUID support. So certain databases like PostgreSQL and SQL Server have a native UUID data type, and in prior versions of Servoy didn't treat that specially. And now we do support it, that you can flag a column as a native UUID, and it'll automatically bind that column type as UUID to what's in the database. You don't have to go through the hoops to do that. And you can also set a preference if it's stored as, or returned as a string or as byte by default. And finally, we made a preference for DBI files and how the order of columns is managed. So now you can actually choose if it's going to be ordered by name or by creation order. The default before was creation order. So now you have a bit more flexibility there. So that kind of covers some of the odds and ends of the update. As I said, this is sort of the preview webinar because the two nicer, bigger demos that we have are going to be the hybrid desktop on Wednesday and the REST web services on Friday, and those will be probably a bit more compelling to watch. But I think we're going to do this going forward, that when we do a release, we'll kind of give you a general update of all the things that have changed, so you can go out and take care of that. Just a quick note, we didn't cut the release yet for Bootstrap components and Bootstrap extra components. That's in testing right now, and so we'll probably cut that release later today. So if you don't see that on the Web Package Manager, don't worry about it. But the other packages I talked about should be available: the SVY search, the Servoy extra components, the 12 grid, the NG grids. Those are all already released. Okay, real quickly, if you're still with us, I wanted to remind you guys about Servoy World. We're pretty excited this year. I think it's going to be one of the most interesting years that we've done this. And I've done this for a long time. Not only are we at the Movenpick, where we had it, Jan, was it 12 years ago, I think, in 2007, which is a really nice hotel in the center of the city and has also been upgraded. We have a nice schedule as well. Before the conference, we're doing what we call Hackathon for a Cause. We have identified a charity to work with. They're excited to work with us, and we feel the same way. And so contrary to a typical hackathon where the teams are in competition to prove some concept or build something and see who made the best, we're going to try to do a community hackathon where teams are working together to build some applications for this charity. And also the small entrance fee the proceeds go to the charity as well. At the same time, I think it's a great opportunity for developers to work together and to learn. We'll have all the Servoy staff at the hackathon there as coaches. So I think, if you're a beginner developer or you're an expert, there's a place for you at this event because the experts can help guide their teams, and the beginners can go and experience the community and get a chance to learn. So we're pretty excited about that event, and that's to kick off the conference. Then we have 2 days of sessions, plus we always have an outing. And then also at the end of the conference, again, we have some workshops, and what we're doing different than this time is typically we do classroom training, but we decided that what we want to have is all the Servoy employees present and in the room, and for this to be more hands-on, working together to build stuff. So we have some topics for the workshops that were, I think, published in the newsletter, and so I think that'll be also a great opportunity for developers to learn and to collaborate.